Fire crews working non-stop, waging an all-out battle from the air and the ground as they brace for the worst of those punishing Santa Ana winds. The National Weather Service warning conditions to be as bad as it gets, with the potential for hurricane-force winds over the next 48 hours. 13 million are under red flag warnings, stretching north of Santa Barbara to San Diego County.
You have all probably heard what's going on in our beautiful city of Los Angeles. The fires have really caused a lot of havoc for us, and we are going to use this episode to kind of give our perspective on what's going on, and also what the consequences are for us going forward, as well as our tango community here in LA. So for those of you who haven't been following, I'm sure it's been on the news frequently here in Los Angeles, but who knows what gets out. We're only kind of in our little bubble here in Los Angeles for the most part. And so since last Tuesday, it's almost been a week. We're filming this on Monday, January 13th. And so last Tuesday, as all of you know, the huge fire in Palisades started and triggered a huge outpouring of fires all over LA. And so the other big one is the Eaton fire close to kind of close to Pasadena, but it's in a smaller town called AltaDena. If you know anyone in Los Angeles, there's a good chance that they either know somebody that's been impacted or have been impacted themselves. As for me, I live with two other tango dancers, and I live in the area close to Encino, California. And so we haven't been evacuated yet, but it is, depending on how the wind changes or the wind shifts, we could seriously be in the thick of it. And so just like anyone in LA, everybody's been on their guard. Everybody's been on this app called Watch Duty. Pretty much gives you all the updates on what's going on in terms of the containment of the fires, the spreading of new fires, and these kinds of things. And so we are recording this before the second wave of Santa Ana winds come in. And so this past week, we dealt with winds of up to 100 miles per hour, which pretty much was the strongest winds I think I've ever felt. Like, I don't know about you, Rob, but I remember waking up in the morning of that Tuesday, and I was like, wait, what is that sound? And it's literally the wind, like blowing over everything, like outside, trash cans, and it was crazy.
Yeah, no, it's. I've experienced Santa Ana winds before. So I live up in Santa Clarita, and I know a lot of you don't even know where that is because it's a really obscure, small suburban area in the northern tip of Los Angeles. But I remember when I first moved up there. So a funny story is when I was a kid, I used to watch these like Disney cartoons, and in the Halloween things where the wind would be blowing and you hear the ghost going woo,
Yeah.
And I always thought it was a joke. I was like, nah, that like whatever. They don't sound like that. And then when I moved up to Santa Clarita, the winds were blowing, and I was like, what the heck? Because it does sound like that. It does sound like that whistling, the woo, like it's like, I like not to make light of the subject, but it is kind of like that. So it kind of freaked me out because like I've never experienced like 60 mile per hour winds, 70 mile per hour winds, and 100 miles. Like it was 100 miles from where I was at because in the valley, when you're in the valley, it becomes like a wind tunnel there. So it's really intense, and I thought, well, trees did fall over, a lot of things got blown around. I lost chairs on my top deck. They went down the ravine, so I had to go fetch a few things. So yeah, it was crazy.
And so for those of you who are unaware, we live in a very highly prone to fires place. A desert is going to be like that. And we have a lot of dry brush, and we haven't had rain in a long time here in Los Angeles. And so you mix all of these components that are bad, and you mix them up in a pot, and that's kind of what we had with this huge disaster that started last Tuesday, which is like, some small fire started. Nobody knows exactly how it started in Palisades. Some say it's man-made, some was an accident, some say it was just, I don't know, brush that caught on fire somehow. Most of the time, there are power lines that fall over or power things that kind of explode from the wind. And so that's kind of triggers some of the other fires that happen. I think that's what triggered the Eaton fire. That's in AltaDena.
Yep.
And so it's a huge conundrum, right? Because the people in charge are like, well, the reason why these fires are starting, most of them, is because a power line falls over and then sparks a fire. What if we turn off the electricity? Maybe that will stop fires from happening. And so that logic of thinking seems to be good, right? Turn off electricity, prevent these fires from happening. Problem is that when you turn off the electricity, that also turns off the
generators.
The generators and the water pressure. And so a lot of the fire hydrants didn't have any water pressure. And so in Palisades, you had a whole bunch of fire, like first responders and firemen there, and they couldn't even use the hydrants because there was no water pressure. Mm-hmm. So they just literally had to sit and watch the town burn because they couldn't really do anything. They had their stuff and the hydrants, they had no water to use.
Way too often, firefighters left without water as hydrants went dry.
They are not designed to fight wildfires. A firefight with multiple fire hydrants drawing water from the system for several hours is unsustainable.
Water! Officials say they weren't able to fill tanks fast enough, which would have helped with the water pressure. Something NBC's Morgan Chesky saw firsthand.
Out of every fire hydrant you've seen, what have you found?
Right now, we're finding most of them are down or low pressure.
If you had a hydrant for this building,
If we had a hydrant for this building, we might have been able to save the back half.
Right, and then some people will say, well, it's this, your government's responsible for, making sure that there's adequate water. I do agree with that in some part, but in another way, it's like this was such a rare occurrence of things to happen all at one time that I don't even think if we had the water, it would have made any difference, honestly.
Well, I take a different stance on that because the Santa Ana winds come every year.
Yeah, but not as strong as this.
Not
this
as strong
is super
as,
strong.
no,
100 miles per hour is unprecedented.
Not as strong as this, true. Yeah. But if you look at other places where there's natural disasters that happen every year, let's say Florida's with her hurricanes, I mean, they might get wiped out, but they're back up and running in a day or two.
I think they've done a phenomenal job with what they've given.
Well,
that's the thing, right? You're talking about preventative stuff, right? We should have done some stuff to prevent stuff from happening, but in terms of responding to what they had, I think they've done an excellent job.
Again, it's one of those things where I think they could have done more, but again,
how? Like they didn't have the water there. They didn't have the water pressure.
Well, you're talking about after the fire, right?
Yeah, after the fire.
No, I'm talking before the fire.
So you're talking about preventative, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm talking, yeah, of course. Well, we can argue all day about preventative measures, about doing preventative fires to make sure that the brush is cleared so this doesn't happen,
or turning out the power lines because that. Or making sure that you have enough water because it's generally a dry season, things like that.
But I mean, I heard some interviews with firemen talking about even if they had a bunch of water, it just still wouldn't have mattered, considering how fast the fire spread, considering how big the fire was. It's just like spitting on like a drop of water on a huge flame. It's not going to do anything.
Okay, so I mean, if that's the case, then should we just sit back and let everything burn then?
No. But I mean, I think where people just kind of go like, oh, this whole thing could have been prevented, I'm not so sure about that. I think it's an unfortunate combination of events that occurred that triggered this whole disaster.
Well, I'm not saying it could be prevented, but I think it could be mitigated. There's a difference.
Maybe. It's hard to tell, right?
Right.
And so there obviously have been a lot of people impacted. There are thousands and thousands of homes lost. There are homes that we know of that are from fellow tango dancers, as well as family members that have unfortunately lost their homes. And the sad part is if you see media, you're gonna see people well, Palisades, that was a rich area. And actually, these areas that got burned, sure, there were some rich people and celebrities, but there were also a lot of hardworking people that saved up their whole life or their family's houses in, from generations of families.
Yeah, I mean, it could, there are people who started there, let's say they bought their home in the 60s, where before it blew up into multi-million-dollar homes. So, I mean, you really don't know. And it just because, should you condemn a whole city because one or two people there are celebrities? That's I think that's kind of rude.
And AltaDena is definitely not
No.
a place where there's a bunch of celebrities. That was a city that had a lot of hardworking people that earned every bit of it, and I feel very bad for those that community just
Yeah,
burned
but
down.
I agree. But I think it's because AltaDena is close to Pasadena, and generally, when people talk about the news, they don't. I mean, they do say AltaDena, but they also mention Pasadena quite a bit.
Yeah, it means adjacent.
So
That's why.
it is. But then people hear Pasadena. Oh, I know Pasadena. It must be like that. So they have a preconceived notion of like who's really being affected out there.
Yeah. I mean, my high school got, affected. I went to Palisades Charter High School, and it was pretty sad. I actually thought it got burnt down, given that everything around it pretty much got flattened. But luckily enough, my high school is still kind of standing strong. Actually, after reports and people on the ground, there was a good chunk of it that got burnt to the ground. But for the most part, it's still holding strong, which is good to hear. But yeah, it's going to take a while to recover from this, for those people, and I feel very bad. Thankfully, there's a lot of people out there that are showing as tremendous support. There are people that are, doing these clothing drives that are like all the clothing's just like everywhere, and like the food drives, and people volunteering to, take people in, and it's been a great showing of generosity considering the disaster. My only concern is that we're only seeing the first half of this, right? Yeah. And so we're filming this at like the halfway point. So we don't know what the heck's gonna go on this next week, because we're gonna get the same kind of winds that we had last week, this week. And so, I mean, I'm crossing my fingers and, hoping with all my fiber that, the fires are gonna somehow stay contained. But with 80 to 100 miles per hour winds again.
And you're like, what, 15% containment?
Yeah, like these fires are not even close to being controlled. And so it's a very bleak, dire situation that I think a lot of people are not really aware of.
Yeah, so just to give you some context, when I first moved to Santa Clarita, we had a huge fire. And we had strong winds also. Came to the point where actually I almost had to get evacuated. The fire came up pretty much one subdivision from my community. So it was pretty darn close. But the fire was 90% contained on one night. And I thought I could just, put my head down and be like, it's all over. 90%, we're pretty much there. High winds came, and we were talking just about 60 mile per hour winds, 60, 70 mile per hour winds, not 100, 60 to 70. And that 90% containment dropped to zero real fast because embers flew out and it burnt the other side of the mountain, hopped the freeway, and came in hot. So just to give you an idea, we were at 90%, went down to zero, hopped the freeway, became an adjacent fire, and then went out of control. So
yeah, those little tiny embers really make some damage, right?
Little embers plus dry fuel plus plus hot winds plus I mean it's when they say California's a Tinder box, California's a Tinder box.
Yeah, and I know everyone's playing the Joe Rogan thing and kind of like making their own conspiracy theories behind it, where he kind of like had this thing on his podcast like 6 months ago talking about.
I talked to a fireman once. He goes, dude, one day, he goes, it's just going to be the right wind and fire's going to start in the right place and it's going to burn through LA all the way to the ocean and there's not a thing we can do about it. I go, really? He goes, yeah, we just get lucky. He goes, we get lucky with the wind. He goes, but if the wind hits the wrong way, it's just going to burn straight through LA and there's not going to be a thing we can do about it. Because these fires are so big, dude. When they're talking about like thousands of acres that are burning simultaneously with like 40-mile-an-hour winds. And the wind's just blowing embers through the air, and those embers are landing on roofs, and those houses are going up, and they're landing on bushes, and those bushes are going up, and everything's dry. And once it happens in a way where it's so spread out that there's nothing they can do.
In terms of Tango, it's interesting because almost all the milongas closed last week due to the fires, which is understandable and just. But I think Tango has a way of kind of healing people, and I'm glad that we've had some tango dancing recently, because I think a lot of people were desperately in need of just kind of like social interaction, getting out of their house, being off their phone, looking at this app of the map of the fire watch duty. I think it's been more good than not.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, it's one of those things where I know some people might criticize others, especially the organizers, to say like, oh, well, you know, these people really should be at home. These people really should be, you know, vigilant and making sure like their home is safe. And
Yeah, how can you make them drive when there's fires out there?
yeah, but I mean, here, you know, everyone's old enough to make their own choice, and sometimes, like, you know, sometimes that 2 to 3 hours is enough to keep people at mind to you know, give them a certain sense of calm away from the panic, so that they could actually, you know, think more reasonably or put things into perspective. Like, you know, I lost my home. But then, you know, you dance a little bit, or, you know, you're amongst friends and you feel the support, and things aren't as dire. Not saying that they're not dire, but they're not as, it's more manageable with the support of your friends and your community.
Yeah, I mean, I even packed a little small couple bags, even though we haven't been close to the warnings yet. And it's interesting, I thought about what should I pack, you know? Like, should I pack some... I packed just your basic essentials because I didn't want to, like, there's one way of thinking. For me, it's just like kind of like, I want to put the energy that it's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So I put it like, kind of like.
The bare minimum?
Yeah, the bare minimum. I just like, you know, my underwear, socks, shirts.
Like, basically a weekend
water.
bag, like a weekend bag.
Exactly, yeah. I'm not like going to take all my prized possessions just yet, because I feel like if I do that, it's kind of like putting in like
inviting in like the
yeah.
like you're spelling your fortune before it even was written.
Exactly, right? But I was talking to another like tango teacher, fellow friend of mine, and he was just like, yeah, I packed all my dress shirts, I packed my dress shoes and my suits, and he's like, and my laptop, and that's all I cared about. And I was like, that's interesting, right? It makes you think about like, what do you like really care about? And he was like, yeah, this is my work, like my clothes and my laptop and.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, I don't know. I mean, I don't have anything. I mean, I have stuff ready to go, but it's not like I packed stuff. You know, like the stuff I have ready to go are like dry food, lots of water.
A lot of water.
Like important legal documents, like deed to the house, things like that.
Yeah.
You know, IDs, like, you know, birth certificates, yada yada yada. But yeah, like it's not like. I think everything else that I'd want to keep, you know, I mean, it can be replaceable. It's like whatever, but yeah, like I guess it's kind of funny because coming from a hoarder, it's kind of funny that
like you don't have a bunch of stuff.
No, if a fire happened, I wouldn't even know, because it's like, oh, I didn't look at anything for like 2 years.
I forgot I had that thing.
Yeah, it's almost like it'd be like a natural purge. I wouldn't even know. It's kind of funny that way, you know.
For me, there's only been one night where I've been really concerned, and it's when the Palisades fire was about to go over this last mountain in a certain direction. And luckily enough, the firefighters and first responders did an amazing job. They were able to use their helicopters, their planes, to just keep dropping fire retardant, dropping water, and it never crossed over that mountain, but you could see it. Like, you can see the fire, and it looked like a volcano. It was like something out of a movie. And I was like, if that thing gets over the mountain, like, wow, like not only our house, but like my college, CSUN, right, my family's house. Like, I was like, just like everything's gonna be gone if that thing goes over, right?
Yeah, it's like, I was there when we were looking at that. I'm like, it seriously looked like something like I was watching Dante's Peak. You know, it was definitely harrowing. And
that's the scary part that people don't understand is like, they can't use those helicopters and planes that pretty much the water drops. They can't use those when the wind is crazy because it's just too dangerous to fly. And so that's what we're looking at in the next few days, where the wind is crazy. They can't use the airdrops anymore, and we are just looking at desperate, like, you know, like, please, like, don't spread, right? Because there's not a lot of things we can do, right? We just don't have the resources.
Yeah.
For this kind of a huge fire to take down. And so, yeah, filming this now, I'm just like, oh man, I'm hoping for the best, but, oh man, just, I don't know what to say. It's just some dire stuff, dire stuff.
Well, what was the positive stuff? Like, what have you seen that Tingo's done in support of the fire? I mean, one of the things, I saw definitely a lot of our fellow dancers really putting out in the community, like, you know, doing the caravanning back and forth with supplies. I mean,
Yeah, that was great.
yeah, I mean, it's one thing. I guess there's a lot of positives that come from this, and I mean, I understand like it is a very dire event, but also at the same time, there is a, you know, I've been really negative about humanity probably the past few years, and it's kind of nice to see that, you know, when pushed against the ropes, we actually can come together and do something positive about it. So, you know, silver lining, I'd say.
Yeah. And I do appreciate, in terms of just the tango community, they have pulled forward and really helped support to some people that have had their homes lost, and they've raised funds already, and I'm sure there's going to be more funds raised. And so, yeah, we'll continue to see what the impact is on our life here in LA and moving forward, and, you know, what the circumstances are after this week, and we'll see. But yeah, let us know what you think about the fires in LA, what you think about it so far, your own thoughts, your own theories maybe. But yeah, that's our perspective of the fires from two tango dancers here in LA. And thank y'all so much for watching, and we will catch you on the next one.
All right, thank you for joining us for this episode of Left Foot, Right Foot. Don't forget to click the subscribe button and notification bell to keep up to us in our latest content.
Yeah, it really goes a long way. We've come a long way so far, and we really appreciate everyone's support in helping us grow this channel and all supporting our lifelong path of really getting social dancing out there and allowing other people to find their way to Argentine tango.